Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see you all here. Today, we're talking about how communication skills in the workplace get you promotions. Kim and I are facilitating. We both have experience with using our communication skills to help us be recognized for the strengths we bring to our positions. If you have questions as we go, we're going to keep this as a fairly informal setting. We set it up as a meeting so that you could jump in, interrupt, ask questions, whatever you like. So feel free to raise your hand or see if you can get our attention. Kim, I'm going to ask that you and Tina keep an eye on people who are raising hands because when I'm showing the PowerPoint, I don't have as much of a view of all the folks. Since we are using a PowerPoint, you might want to use speaker view so that you can see the person who's speaking and then the PowerPoint, but it's totally up to you how you want to experience this little session. So to start off with, let's get into our introductions. I'd first like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Stalo territory. So Israel, I am grateful for being on the land that has been stewarded by the Stalo people for so long, people of the river, and it's a little bit scary right now to think we might be people of the lake once again. I know there's a lot going on in our world, and I think that Mother Nature is perhaps trying to tell us a few things. So I think it's time for us to maybe gain some appreciation for and better understanding of some First Nations wisdom and pay attention to what's happening around us a little better. Anyway, I am still grateful to be here and glad that we're able to join from this particular location. I have been in the communications department at UFV for 16 years and I love the work here. I was department head for 8 years. I've had a variety of different roles at the institution, including I am the chair of the Undergraduate Education Committee, which is one of the largest Senate subcommittees, doing most of the curriculum review work for the institution. I've also been the acting associate dean of students, and I believe I said I was department head for 8 years. So I have lots of experience with leadership roles and how those communication skills really can ramp up your career in unexpected and great ways. I'd like Kim now to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Norman. I am also, as Samantha mentioned, an associate professor in the communications department. I want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from Maple Ridge, the traditional lands of the Katzie and the Kwantlen First Nations people. It's a beautiful day, and I'm appreciative of the weather out there and the land that we're on. And I'm also wanting to just extend my recognition and acknowledge those where you are who are struggling and challenged right now by the conditions. I agree with you, Samantha. This is a good opportunity for us to take a listen to what nature is telling us. My background is in writing studies. I began my work as an editor at a local magazine. So I have a lot of experience working in that profession. And also I've worked as a grant writer in my past. When I came to UFE 20 years ago, I worked in the Writing Center, which has been morphed into another unit now, but it gave me a really great chance to get a deeper understanding of the kind of work that students are doing in their disciplines and in different capacities at UFE. So I was fortunate to be able to come to communications in around 2013, 2014. I think I had a baby around then too, so I forget the specific time. But to bring that experience with writing and the different professional experiences I've had working as a contract writer and as an editor and grant writer. So I'm happy to have you here today and happy to work with you all as we discuss this topic and your own experiences with it.
Thanks, Kim. Now I'd like to ask our two student panelists to introduce themselves. First, we have Angeline Bennett.
Hey folks, it's nice to be here. So yes, my name is Angeline Bentley and I've taken three English courses until now. So I've done academic writing skills, and then I did professional communications course, and then I did currently doing professional writing in workplace. So it's great so far, and I've been learning a lot. Again, my communications is also in progress, so I'm learning a lot every day. And we have amazing instructors like Samantha Patridge and Kim. They're all very passionate about what they do. So like asking questions has been really helpful for me too. So I am in the BBA program. I am in the second year. I'm taking second year courses right now, but I've been in the program since 2018. I've been doing part-time courses because I'm doing full-time job at the same time. My previous work experience is with Archway Community Services. So I've held two positions there. I was the settlement services worker, which I deal with new immigrants, helping them integrate to the society. I was also an admin assistant at the same time. And currently I am with Sarah for Women's Society. I am working as the payroll and finance clerk. So yeah, I have some experiences that hopefully I could share with you in terms of how my communication skills have helped me so far. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Angeline, and my apologies for getting your last name wrong. That's what I get for relying on memory. Next up, we have Serena Burton joining us.
Hi guys, my name's Serena. I'm a third year student in the BBA program as well. I'm a big advocate for working and learning in the workplace as well as learning in school. So I'm always working part-time and usually only take like 2 or 3 courses at a time as well. That's how I find a really good work-life balance. And that's also how I find that I can use both the skills that I'm learning in the workplace towards my school and vice versa. So I've worked in a lot of different genres. I originally wanted to become an event planner before I joined the BBA program. So I took some courses at UFB for that. And I went and worked in Vancouver for a couple of event services there. And then I worked for City of Abbotsford doing their like filming crew and any of their big events here. And then I moved into tourism and worked for Tourism Chilliwack for 1.5 years, learning about different ways that we can bring people to Canada and doing things like that. And then COVID happened and one thing led to another, and now I'm a bar manager at a restaurant in Chilliwack. So yeah, happy to be here. And I hope that I can share some of my experiences and hopefully they'll be relatable to people.
Thanks very much, both of you, for joining us today. It sounds like you have some interesting career and education experiences. It'll be great to hear some more about that. So as you can see from our agenda, we're going to cover a basic intro to what the skills are that we need to get ahead at work, and then focusing in on 3 of those in particular, which would be intercultural skills. I'll discuss those. Interpersonal skills, Kim and I'll go back and forth on that, and then writing skills covered by Kim. We've framed each of those sections with a short background or theoretical approach on what's needed to be successful, followed by some practical tips. What can you do? These aren't all tips that you can just write them down, implement immediately. Some of them require a little bit more study and further work, but we've tried to keep it as practical and day-to-day as we can. And then we'll have a session with the students to be able to explain to us how their experiences have illustrated some of these skills. And then at the end, we have time for questions and a wrap up. So let's turn it over to Kim to walk us through some of the background and what those skills are for getting ahead.
Thank you. So we had to open with a dog slide. I mean, you have to have that, right? That's important in any presentation. I wanted to open with this also because funny as it is, you know, the idea that good communication can be chalked up to sort of one skill, or we can sort of imagine one magic bullet that will give us what we need to be amazing communicators is just not realistic. Good communication is the culmination of many skills. So that's partly what I think Samantha was addressing today. We're going to talk about some of those skills that you need to bring together and develop in order to maximize your effectiveness as a communicator in your workplaces, in your school environments, in your life. Soft skills are one way we might describe you know, those supporting skills that we need to be good communicators. Communication is something that we rely on all sorts of other skills for. And soft skills, you probably heard this term before. They are also referred by some people as people skills, 21st century skills, power skills, essential skills, applied skills. You probably have heard other terms as well. And in fact, soft skills itself is sometimes regarded as a bit of a misnomer. The idea that the skills you need to be a good communicator are soft, almost giving it a negative connotation, which I would argue is quite the opposite. These are power skills. So this is a slide from, this is taken from an article by Gonzalez and Vodka in 2021. And they identify this list of desired soft skills in the workplace. And it's interesting with these lists, and maybe you've seen lists like these before. It's interesting that always at the top or near the top is communication. But you can see there are other skills as well that go along with communication and support it. So we have critical thinking, we have EQ, which stands for emotional intelligence quotient, flexibility, information management, leadership, teamwork, tech savviness, and work ethic. And you can probably already begin to imagine how all of these different skills factor in to this idea of communication. Rao actually says, and this is interesting, I didn't include the quote in our slides, but communication skills are both the cornerstone of soft skills and a subset of soft skills. And I think when we talk about communications, I often think about that sort of iceberg analogy. If we have communication at the top as that tip that we see above the water, all of these other skills are underlying it, are at the foundation to ensure that communication is effective. So we want to be always thinking about not just what it means to be an effective communicator, but what it means to be a good critical thinker, a flexible communicator, a good manager of information, which is something Samantha and I were talking about recently, a good leader. What's it mean to be a leader? And we're going to get to that. And also, how do we integrate these other skills that we see on the list? So I also want to draw your attention to this image, this graphic that was recently posted on the Government of Canada website. What's identified here are 9 skills, key skills for success. And once again, what do we see front and center? Even though this is cyclical, right at the top, we see communication. But Samantha, if you hit the next slide, I just want to star for you. Out of the 9 skills here, 5 of them are directly related or directly aligned with what we call soft skills, right? Creativity and innovation, problem solving, collaboration, adaptability. These are all the types of skills that go into communication, but aren't really tangible. They're not really the types of skills we can specifically train for in the ways we can maybe say numeracy, reading skills, and even writing. And I have included writing in here because writing is obviously a key form of communication, but it also involves hard skills, right? We have to train, we have to hone our writing abilities to become good writers, but that is going to sort of factor into our communication as well. And then I also wanted to show this, an excerpt from an infographic by the Conference Board of Canada. Notice right at the top, the difficult skills or the employers that are, the difficult skills employers are finding out there involve critical thinking and problem solving as the top one that's most difficult to find. And when you think about it, right next to it, right below it, we see oral communication and literacy. These are intimately connected, these skills, right? To be able to communicate, to be able to problem solve, we need to have all those other skills that allow us to communicate effectively. So we can see how imperative, and on this list as well, we can see how many of these soft skills are present. So critical thinking, oral communication, reading, writing, and document use aligns, of course, with communication, working with others, and really critical. Continuous learning, because these are not skills that you develop and you never have to revisit. We constantly want to be working on these skills and developing them and adapting them for our unique and ever-changing circumstances. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Samantha to take us to a specific type of communication that is supported by and intimately tied to our soft skills.
Thanks, Kim. Now that we have that background on why these skills are so important for the workplace, we'd like to focus on these three in particular. Intercultural communication, it sounds a bit odd to call that a skill, but I was very pleased. In 2017, I attended a workshop with the American Association of Colleges and Universities. We were working on the structure of the Bachelor of Arts degree at UFV, and I was asked to be part of the task force that went down to California to spend a weekend workshopping what we could do for our degree. When I was there, I came across these value rubrics that are produced by the AAC&U. These rubrics are meant to give instructors and administrators and students some insight into what it takes to be competent at all the different essential skills, what they call them as essential skills. These are used in all kinds of ways across the American education system in higher ed, and I thought this is fantastic. So what I'm sharing with you right now is an excerpt from the rubric for intercultural sensitivity. Intercultural sensitivity, it sounds like it's something that you're just born with, like you're either empathetic or you're not, but actually this is a skills-based thing. You can improve your intercultural sensitivity. There are specific things you can do to do better in this regard. So I wanted to share with you some of the best pieces of it. When you have cultural self-awareness, you can see, I just realized I've missed some little bits out of my PowerPoint. Was supposed to be simpler, but you've got more information than you have. You can see that if you are demonstrating cultural self-awareness, you're providing some insight into your own cultural rules and biases. You understand that you're coming from a particular set of beliefs, from a particular background, that your experience has shaped how you see the world. So you start to recognize how to respond to cultural biases, and you can shift how you describe yourself. If you're at the advanced capstone level, this is all advanced level, so there are different levels in this rubric, which I'd be happy to share with you if you're interested. Then you have a knowledge of cultural worldview frameworks. You understand that there are different worldviews out there. You can identify a few of them, explain how they work, and maybe do some comparisons. You can understand how culture is related to history, values, politics, communication styles, etc. The other skills that are identified here, in addition to the knowledge, include empathy and verbal and nonverbal communication. Empathy is, again, something that you can develop, and it's something that requires a little bit of time, a little bit of study, a little bit of reflection. But if you are considered truly empathetic at the capstone level in terms of intercultural sensitivity, then you can interpret experience from the perspective of your own culture and also from others. You're also able to be supportive and recognize the feelings of other cultural groups. This is something that I feel that often in Canada we do quite well. Often we also do very badly. So it all depends on the situation. We've got examples of both. Verbal and nonverbal communication is where you can articulate understanding of cultural differences in verbal and nonverbal communication styles. For example, you may have heard about high context cultures and low context cultures. Some people, some cultures have to say a lot, and they say a lot around a subject, but without actually giving a direct answer. Other cultures, like North American, Canadian, tend to be low context, which means you don't give all the stuff around the idea, you just tell the idea. That's it. In other cultures, that might actually be considered rude. So for example, in some cultures, you're not really supposed to say no. You go around and you hint at saying no, but you don't actually say no, because that would be unforgivably rude. Whereas in Canada, we're quite happy to just say no. Well, depends on the person, I guess. Some people are happy to say no. And then finally, there's attitudes. Attitudes of curiosity and openness are key factors in intercultural sensitivity. So it's about being willing to ask questions, knowing when is a time to ask questions, feeling that internal prompt that says, maybe I should question this. Maybe what's coming from my own experience and background isn't something that everybody experiences. Now I see that we have a question or something in the chat. Oh, sorry. That was just Kim. Never mind. My fault. So let's look at some tips for this, and then we'll hear from our students. And these tips, they don't come from anywhere in particular. They come from my experience. They come from my background teaching intercultural communication. I have a master's degree in writing and cultural politics, which studied a lot about intercultural communication and especially writing. So these are the things that I recommend. Try really hard not to assume anyone's experience, culture, or background when you're at work. This actually goes for gender as well. You've got to be careful not to assume anything about anyone. Treat everyone as an individual. And then number two, try to learn about other people's background, their culture, their countries. Acknowledge there are different communication styles based on cultural backgrounds people come from, and stay informed on world news and events so you can speak knowledgeably. Of course, right now, all we can see is what's happening right here in our own backyard, but there are a lot of other things happening in the world that we should keep up with. It's not always that easy to do. And finally, continue to study and learn about intercultural communication concepts. We've got some resources at the end that can help you with that, but taking a course, there are all kinds of free MOOCs out there that would help you. Those are the massive open online courses. There are lots of options, and those all look really good on your resume if you have some specific kind of intercultural training. I know it definitely helped me having that degree on my transcript because people were interested in the fact that I had some specific training in how to handle intercultural communication situations. So let's ask our students now. Either one of you can answer. What we'd like to know is if you have examples of how these intercultural communication skills have played out for you in the workplace or at school. Do you have an example of a time when something happened or you were able to use your skills to good effect and do something really worthwhile? I'm just going to stop this show for a minute so we can just hear you.
I can go first. So I grew up in a very, not like specifically, like my parents weren't like, no, we're not going to teach you any like different cultures or anything, but so it wasn't on purpose, but I grew up in a very like Catholic household. I went to a Catholic private school that only had like 200 other students in it at a time. And so I really didn't have a lot of education on different diversities of different culture or anything like that. And so then I get to, after school, I get to UFE, and my first courses in the business world is my Business 100 course, which has got that big project worth 50%. And I knew that I liked to be a group leader for this project because I like to have control over the projects. And so our groups got assigned, and it was myself and I think like 3 or 4 other students, all from India. And they had all just moved here for their first year of courses. This is their first time being anywhere other than their home country. And this was a really big learning experience for me because I was like, we've got this language barrier, but also just like the barrier of how we do our work. Like I considered myself a good student. I wanted to plan things like ABC, this is how we're going to do things. And they were like, oh, well, we're just going to kind of do whatever we want. No, we don't want to do the deadline. And I was like, okay, like we had to really communicate on how we're going to make it work so that both of us all of us could like have the same end goal, but also kind of figure out how the way they like to do their work would affect me, vice versa. So we would get together, and I would have a lot of difficulty getting everybody to include me in the conversation because, of course, everybody would just start talking in Punjab, and I'm like, okay, like, hey, I'm sorry, can we find a good balance here? And so we ended up working out like, okay, like if we can complete our work today, can you teach me a couple words in Punjab, or vice versa? And so we just kind of started making little connections like that, where I was like, I understand it's really hard for you to be here in a new country doing new things. And they even said to me, like, look, our parents have always done our schoolwork. Like, we need a lot of extra help. And I'm like, I'm so willing to help you do that. But at the same time, like, I need you to meet me where you can, and I'll put in the extra effort because I know doing this project was a lot for them. So yeah, I really tried to make connections with them on like learning their language. And I mean, like, I can't speak anything to it now, but I tried to make connections with them in that way. And yeah, I thought that was a really, really incredible learning experience for me, because I just totally grew up with everything being one way. And yeah, I hope that's a good summary of my story. But
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Angelin?
Yes, so like Serena, I also like to take control in group projects because I want to make sure that I'm responsible for my grade. And yeah, so I have a lot of experience in terms of intercultural communication. I've been lucky enough to be born in my country where I came from the Philippines for 333 years. We were colonized by the Spaniards, so we have that kind of cultural sensitivity that is ingrained in us. And so, and also growing up, being a person who is very open-minded really helped me seek that understanding of other cultures. And I do that at work as well. Like it's not like, it's an everyday thing for me. Like every day you learn something new about different cultures and different understanding on how they like process information and thoughts. It was important for me because when you're culturally aware, you kind of understand how their thought processes are, and then so you can step in and think like how they think. And then that way, the communication between you and that person becomes more effective. And as a settlement worker, I deal with many different clients, newcomers to Canada. Some people have very little English. And there was one experience that really struck out to me. I was in the reception at that time as part of my admin assistant job. So most of the time I spent in the reception. And so it was an interaction between my colleague and the client. So this client is obviously a member of the LGBTQIA+ community. And I noticed her before that she interchangeably used he or she sometimes. And so mistakenly, she addresses this person a he, and he didn't like that. And then it actually escalated to our supervisor. And so a diversity training was launched for that reason, to make sure that everyone is aware about, the wording, like the words that we use in everyday communications to our clients. It was very important. And yeah, so for me, like what could she have done in that situation to avoid escalation is recognize that she made a mistake and really sincerely address it to the person that I didn't mean it, rather than waiting for the person to address it to you that, oh, hey, you made a mistake. So something like that. You have to be very aware of what you say. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's an interesting example, definitely, of taking the intersection between where sometimes our intercultural consideration spills into other areas. It's very, very good examples from both of you. Thanks very much. I'll just start this PowerPoint show again and turn it over to Kim to talk a little bit about our next skill, which is interpersonal communication. Very strong links to intercultural, but also slightly different.
Thanks, Samantha. There we go. I just want to acknowledge, both those really great anecdotes from the two of you and just the stories you were telling. I think that openness you both showed, that sort of awareness that in order to handle the situations you were in, hearing and interacting with others in order to develop everyone's intercultural awareness allowed you ultimately to be effective communicators. So you can sort of see how all these skills culminate and they have to work together. We can't just sort of imagine our communication being one sort of magic, one magic thing, one magic bullet or something like that. And I like this quote because it also speaks to that as we move into interpersonal skills and interpersonal communication. So I'll just read this really quickly and then we'll talk about some tips. Within an organization of any size, people interact through communication. They send each other emails, they sit in meetings and on committees, they chat as they pass on the stairs or share a sandwich at lunchtime. And everything about the way they do all of this sends out signals. It tells the world, or at least the organization, something about them. Are they knowledgeable, competent, expert, decisive, and easy to deal with? Would you take their advice, follow their lead, or support their cause? All the different ways in which people interrelate act together cumulatively and progressively to build up and maintain an image of each individual. That comes from Forsyth. And again, I'm thinking about the stories we just heard and how your behavior really spoke a lot, through the situations you were facing, about how you as individuals and you as part of an organization demonstrated your effective communication abilities. So when it comes to interpersonal tips, there's a lot we could talk about, but Samantha and I discussed really identifying 3 key areas. And I want to start with listening. It's critical that listening be an active process. And Samantha and I talked about how do we describe this? We talked about listening being involving a kind of internal awareness, external awareness, and this making sense component as well. So when we're talking about the internal aspect of listening, what do we mean by that? We're talking about what you need to do when you are listening, what you're doing when you're hearing. There's the type of listening we do at night when we're trying to get to bed and unwind and we're watching something and we're maybe checking our text messages and we're not really fully focusing on any one thing in particular. But the kind of active listening we want to develop, and this is a skill that we need to hone. I think all of us can continue to work on it. We want to think about concentrating, avoiding unneeded interruptions. So having those extraneous noises turned off like ringers, etc. We want to also be confirming information that we hear. Samantha spoke earlier about being aware of what's going on in the world, like being worldly wise, paying attention to the news, so that we can, when we hear something, not immediately necessarily react, but put it in its place and think about how to manage that information. It's important as well to stay focused and to be taking notes, whether they are mental or written notes, so that we know what to do with the information as it comes to us. Now, external, we brought that up as well, because that refers to what you're doing to show you're listening. And oftentimes, as you may appreciate and understand yourselves, when you engage in physical behavior that shows you're listening, it enhances your ability to listen. So eye contact, harder to do obviously via Zoom, but that ability to nod, give hand gestures, to do things that allow people to know you are paying attention is really important. And then finally, along with that, shows of empathy, I think, fits with external, letting people know you are not just hearing, but you are empathizing with them, understanding what they're saying, and then making sense of what they're saying. So this goes back to that taking notes, putting in place what you hear and not immediately reacting to it, but rather focus in on key points. Try not to lose the focus, your focus on any sort of tangential information that's being shared, and be clarifying in your mind and actively assessing information as it comes in. It's okay to interrupt someone or to wait for your moment to speak up when you need clarification or you need someone to just confirm what they said, so that you know for sure that what you heard is accurate and moving the conversation in the direction it needs to go in. So I'm going to turn it over to Samantha to now speak about speaking.
One of my passions. We accidentally ended up with a nice little 3P acronym here for speaking. We had two in a row, and then Kim said, let's find another one. It's not quite as simple as this. The main thing about speaking, we're talking about impromptu speaking right now. We're talking about those times when you're in a meeting. Maybe there's a bunch of people around the table and you've had some serious conversation. You think you want to put your 2 cents in there to see if you're on the right track, or to ask an important question, or to give your opinion on what's already been said. This is a key moment in anybody's career where you can make or break how people perceive you by the way you present yourself. I find it really crucial that people have impromptu speaking skills. And so many times, even at senior admin levels, the inability to string sentences together can actually lead to people not being taken as seriously. So the most important thing you need to do is pause before you begin. Think about what's actually been said. Think about what's not been said. Think about what you need to say. If you're only going to speak to repeat what someone else has said, maybe you don't need to speak. But if you do have something to add and something that's meaningful, that's going to contribute and pull the conversation forward, that's the time to speak. Before you get started, prepare what you want to say in your head. You need to practice this skill. It's not something you just have. You have to practice by putting yourself in situations where you get to do impromptu speaking regularly. So join an improv group or join a Toastmasters club. Do something. Take Communications 235, public speaking. Do something that's going to allow you to practice those impromptu skills, because it's really difficult when someone throws a topic at you, or you've been in the middle of a meeting and you've got to think, okay, I have this vague idea, but I need to speak and I need to do it now before the moment's gone. How do I put that out there? I always recommend using a direct pattern. Just start with what you need to say first, unless you have a hostile audience. But if it's not a hostile audience, go with, this is what I think. Here's my idea. And then put in a few supporting details. Keep it as concise as you can so that everybody understands. But really, it's just about getting your idea out there. So it's a two-part thing. It's finding the idea, but then also preparing what you want to say and how you want to say it. If you are organized enough and skilled enough to be able to say, here's my point, and there are 3 reasons I think this. 1, 2, 3. You're going to sound really, really smart. So practice that skill. It's a good skill. The last step is to present. We did talk about people who have a hard time stringing their sentences together. Again, you've got to practice. If you're worried about the number of times you say and like, or you're concerned that your sentences trail off grammatically and then they just kind of end in the middle and you start a new sentence by accident, those are the kinds of things you need to practice in some other setting in advance, because it's almost like muscle memory. You start to learn how to be able to think a sentence ahead or a half a sentence ahead, so that what comes out of your mouth is not placeholders or fillers. You also need to think about making eye contact with the people around the room, connecting with them on that level, and think about your body language. Confident body language is good, nothing too distracting, but more importantly, your voice. I found the voice is the most powerful tool. If you sound hesitant and you're doing upspeak at the end of every sentence where your voice goes up, you sound like you're not sure. Whereas if you have a strong voice, a reasonable volume, not shouting at anyone, but good enough volume so they can hear you, and your tone goes down at the ends of sentences, you sound authoritative. You sound like you know what you're talking about, you have confidence in what you're saying, and you believe in it. And therefore, everyone else can believe in it too. That's a lot. It's a hard order. It's a tall order to get really good at that interpersonal communication skill of public speaking, but do your best, keep working on it. And the last one we wanted to bring up in interpersonal is leading, because leading is a combination of all those other interpersonal skills, and it can be tough. In 2016, I was nominated by my department for the UFE Inspirational Leadership Award, which was such an honor. I did receive the award, partly because of my work as a department head and partly because of my work on the committee. And when I was asked, what do you think makes you a good leader? I was able to say that I definitely espouse a model of servant leadership. What that means is that I consider myself as facilitating the meetings or facilitating the groups of which I'm in charge. I'm not an authority I'm not the boss. I'm not someone who's telling other people what to do. My job is to ensure the work gets done smoothly. And in fact, it's often doing a lot of the grunt work and a lot of the unpleasant work, but it's the work that needs to be done. You serve as a liaison between different levels. Some of the most important tips I can give you for when you're in any kind of leadership role is to communicate often and communicate well. Be totally transparent. You are accountable to the people that you are working under you, and you're also accountable to the people that you report to. See yourself as that two-way swinging door where you've got information going back and forth. Sometimes you have to curate the information so that the people who need that information coming from you get the right information and they maybe get your opinion on it, but make sure that you're not misleading. So be as fair and as ethical in your representation as you can, and make sure you keep that accountability going in both directions. For me, being a leader is all about developing relationships. Check in with the people that you're leading, make sure that they're good, check in one-on-one, ensure that if anybody has any discomfort or something's going on, they're comfortable coming to you to say, ugh, this thing. And then you're able to help them work through a solution. You don't have to have all the answers as a leader. You don't have to have all the skills, but you do need to be able to listen and to communicate and to be transparent and ethical. So let's hear from our students. Now that we've set that up with all these massive skills, let's hear from my students about what kinds of leadership or listening or speaking opportunities they've had to showcase their skills in work and school.
My very first experience with public speaking was in a debate competition in my university back in the Philippines. I was at that time studying Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. And oh wow, I sucks at it. Like I suck at it. I was bad, really bad at it. Like I was in the debate competition just because there was not much students in the program taking mathematics. So there has to be someone to represent our program. So I have to be there. So that was my very first experience. And that was I feel so devastated about myself because I thought I wasn't able to express what I really wanted to say. I have so many interesting things to say about the topic for the debate. So yeah, and from there, like I really wanted to develop that area of myself, speaking and my interpersonal skills. It's been like I have improved so much since then, and taking a bunch of English courses and communication courses has helped a lot. So yeah, in the leadership experiences that I have in my schoolwork, yeah, I've been pretty much the leader of my schoolwork because I want to be a leader like Serena. So it's been very successful so far. I agree with Samantha with all the points that you've given about building relationship. That is really important. I totally agree with that. For me, I am kind of a servant leader as well. I want to make sure that I'm doing all those things, but making sure as well that my team members know that this is what the process has been for me to do this part of the project. So they know when they get into this kind of experience in the future, they know what to do. And I constantly check in with them. And sometimes I tend to micromanage because I ask people, hey, where are you at the project? So yeah, it's been very successful for me in the group setting. I still have so many things to improve for sure, but yeah, just continue to be open-minded, seek understanding, and have that drive within yourself for self-improvement. Thank you.
Thanks, that's great. Serena?
All right, so I had so many examples for this one. I was like, I don't know which one to talk about, but one of my most recent examples is when I've started to become a bar manager at the restaurant that I've been working at. I only have a few years restaurant experience, and if that, like, it's only part-time. And so I was like, why the heck do they want me to become a manager here? And I'm working at a newer restaurant, and they said, because you communicate. Because if you're the one on shift and something happens, you let us know. If something happens between coworkers, you work it out, you let it know, and you let us know. And they said there's just such a lack of communication in the building. And they're like, you know, skills, you can learn those, but like we need somebody who's able to follow through with everything happening. And yeah, I was really connecting with what Samantha was saying about like facilitating. It's really just about like, I found that managing is really just about like listening to what everybody has to say. You know, there's a lot more people in the building who have a lot more experience than I do. They, in my opinion, they have better opinions than I do. They have like better ideas. And it's really just about like picking out everybody's ideas, listening to what everybody has to say, and then deciding the plan of action and following through with it and going through the steps and the communications that you need to do for that. So yeah, that's not one specific example, but that's just kind of generally what I've found in my workplace.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I love that we don't know who's got the best idea in the room, and it's most often not us. So being open to hearing what other people have to say is really important. Okay, back into our PowerPoint, and we'll head off to writing skills and back to Kim.
Great, thank you. And thank you again for those great experiences, for sharing those. Let's take a look now at writing skills. And I was saying to Samantha, maybe this is the most familiar to all of our guests today, all of those involved in this, but maybe not. Let's think about what we do know and what we need to work on. This quote comes from the International Plain Language Federation. And I think it's a good one to just set as a foundation for our conversation today. A communication is in plain language if its wording, structure, and design are so clear that the intended audience can easily find what they need, understand what they find, and use that information. And Serena, I keep thinking, not pinpointing your work at all, but in our class, right, we're constantly talking about we need to get the point across. Say what you want to say it, and then reiterate what that message is, so your reader knows what to do. So when it comes to writing tips, and I'm going to keep this kind of short and sweet because I do want to hear from you, Serena and Angeline. But just like with our communication skills generally, there isn't one magic sort of bullet to make us all effective writers. We have to be thinking about all the skills that we need to master and develop in order to communicate effectively. And with writing, part of that begins with our preparation. That's a big part of what goes into effective communication. So we always need to start, no matter what it is we're communicating, how big or small. We want to think about who's our audience and what's our purpose. What's the context for this message that I am preparing, and what kind of timeline do I have? Is this something that I need to get out in moments? I think of the crisis communication that's going on right now around the flooding. The information needs to be imparted to the community very quickly in some cases. So how do we work within those constraints? And what flexibility do we have if we do have more time to assess our situation? Once we've had a chance to really think about who am I writing to, what is it I'm trying to convey, and what do I need to know about that situation, we want to try to think big picture. We want to start by saying, what is that message, and what are the details then that I need to focus on in order to convey that successfully? And as Samantha spoke about in the previous interpersonal section, we want to prioritize being direct if we can, especially in the workplace, because we don't need to distract people with extraneous information. However, if the message we're trying to impart could be received negatively, or there could be hostility, we might need to rethink our strategy and buffer our purpose. So that might be familiar to some of the people here today who have studied communications courses and understand that messaging changes depending on the situation we find ourselves in. And then finally, style, right? We want to go from big picture issues, contextual issues, to developing our message, to polishing our message. And that polish really matters at the end of the day, because you can have the best planning and preparation in place, but if you don't write that message clearly, if you are not concise, if there are mistakes, we know that that message may not be taken seriously, or it might be disregarded as misinformation, or somehow it might put your authority into question. So you might think that a grammar check or a concision check are minor in the grand scheme of things after all the other prep work you may have done to write your message, but really they can make or break a message. And just as a sort of interesting little side note to that, one way we're told to check for misinformation that we might encounter online or wherever is, grammar, like looking at to see how well it's written. Have names been properly spelled? Are there grammar issues? So I don't want to say it's the everything of a message, but it's really, really critical at the end. So with style, we want to think about being concise, but being complete. We want to have a tone that is approachable, but also professional. You don't want it to be so stilted that people can't recognize you in the message and identify with you. And we want the action to be clear. What is that purpose and what should your recipient do? The last thing you want is someone to say, okay, I've read this message, but I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do as a result. I better email that person or contact that person to get clarification. That is inefficient, and that's going to cost people valuable time and potentially valuable money at the end of the day too for an organization. So these are all important tips that we've heard, but we really need to think about embracing. And I'm wondering, what kinds of experiences our panelists have had related to communication. We've talked a little bit about interpersonal and intercultural, but when it comes to your writing, what could you share that relates to the importance of clear and thorough communication?
I can share about a event that we had when I worked at City of Abbotsford. Every year they do a big Canada Day celebration at Rotary Stadium, and they estimate anywhere between like 10 to 30,000 people come every single year. And I was amazed when I started working there. I helped them kind of plan it. The entire thing is planned over email. They have like one in-person meeting the week before with all of the vendors. And I was just like totally mind blown how they did that, because it's everything. It's like a 12-hour day, everything from like 15 different events going on at every single time, every little thing from the tents that people are used to the performers, to the food, to this, to that. Every single detail is planned thoroughly over email. And the communication has to be so precise on exactly what time everybody's showing up, what time everybody's going, like their location. And I really had to learn about like the importance of detail and being thorough, precise, like double checking that there wasn't any miscommunications, double checking that my information was correct to not give out misinformation. And so, yeah, that was a really incredible learning experience for me, because I was like, I totally just assumed that it would be the kind of thing where we'd have to meet in person every single week and months out prior. But no, like pretty much everything was planned over email. And then we got in person once with all the vendors the week before, just to make sure everybody was on the same page. And that was it. Like, so yeah, that was a really incredible learning experience for me.
Wow, thank you. Angeline.
Yeah, so for me, okay, so in my current job right now, I'm working as a payroll and finance clerk. And on that, with that, my part of my responsibilities is a little bit of HR. So I work really closely with the HR and payroll manager. And there are times where I have to send out communication to tell them, to inform employees that their wage has increased. I have to initiate those wage increases based on the union collective agreement, based on their entitlement and seniority hours. So the very first time that I was instructed to write that communication over email for our records for their personal file, I said in the end something like, thank you for your continued dedication to work with the organization. And 2 days later, someone came back, one of the managers in the organization thought that, oh, she should not be saying that part because this is not a raise of wage based for their performance. And I thought that was a very interesting point. And from my perspective, when I was writing that communication, I thought that I want to be nice. I want to motivate them to continue like what they do with Sarah. But I was not in the authority, obviously, to say that. And So I have to, from then, I really have to be very careful in crafting my message and what I say and how I structure it. So now I have created a template which everybody's happy about, and concise and direct. So yeah, that was very a really good working experience for me. And yes, like as Kim mentioned, like being clear about the action in the end of your email, that is really important. That is my peeve at the at work, because people are asking about, hey, why is my payments like this? And I that's just one sentence or two sentences, and I said, okay, what are you trying? Like my thought process is, what kind of payment? Okay, is it from 2020, 2021? What is the date? What are the details? So these are the things that make your time more inefficient, just because you're going back and forth for these tiny little details that should have been mentioned at the very beginning. So yeah, it's very important. And I've learned a lot from the communication scores. So being concise is still I'm working on, but yes, it's a work in progress. Thank you so much.
You're doing great. Thank you very much. I just wanted to show you very quickly, everyone, the resources that we have pulled together, and we will share this PowerPoint with you, but just some of the things that you can do. You can definitely engage in self-reflection. You can look at the trends and the feedback that you receive. So you might receive feedback from school, you might receive feedback from work. Identify the areas where you could use a little bit of strengthening and then deliberately pursue those. We've also identified some self-assessment tools that are produced by the Government of Canada. These are live links, so we'll send you the PowerPoint as meeting participants afterwards. And then of course there's education, and you can also look into some plain language writing resources. Now, I want to first off say thank you very much to our student panelists. I'm sorry, Amelia actually couldn't make it. She was going to originally share her thoughts by writing, but with all of the flooding situation, she wasn't able to make it. But thank you so much for coming. I think your experience added a lot. And the rest of our time is for question and answer. I have a references slide as well, which we're just going to update because I noticed this morning that one is missing. So we'll pop that in there and we'll send it out to all of you who participated and who attended. What questions do you have? What can we help you out with?
I'm also wondering if some of our guests can identify with some of the stories they heard today, because yeah, all sorts of ideas and experiences came to my mind as I was listening to Samantha and Serena and Angeline. So maybe you can identify with the experiences.
Yeah, me too. One of the things that I was thinking actually as we were going through, I didn't recognize it when we were building this presentation, but as I was listening and hearing what the students had to say too, I realized we cannot separate critical thinking skills from communication skills. You cannot have one without the other. You could be the best thinker in the world, but if you can't explain your ideas, you're out of luck. Likewise, if you talk really well, but what you're saying is garbage, you're also out of luck. So you need to make sure those skills work together, and you need to develop both.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that these tips are helpful to you. If you'd like any more tips or more specific information or advice, you can feel free to get in touch with me or with Kim. We're happy to chat with you anytime. And I appreciate all of you attending today. It was a great session. We'll make this available by video at some point. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to do that, but we'll let you know. Everybody who was signed up, we'll let you know if you want to look back on it or share it with any of your friends or family or people that you know, coworkers. So thank you very much. Kim, I'll let you have the last little word here.
Oh, I just want to also echo your thanks to everyone who attended and to our panelists for sharing their really valuable insights today. I think it's really important not just to think about what we're learning in our courses and in other aspects of our life, but how we're applying this information. And that's something we really focus on in communications. It's not just the educational part, it's the application part. So to hear your experiences about how you've used your experience and viewed your experiences with communication on the ground in your workplaces is really helpful. So thank you for that today.